Welcome to the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services podcast. I'm Gail Lucas, your host. I'm also the Division Chief for the Customer Support and Outreach Division here at DPS. Joining us on the podcast today is David Burch. He is the DPS Residential Inspection Manager. Yes?
Right.
Thank you for joining us, Dave. He's going to talk to us about residential pool permits, pool safety, and the importance of pool barriers.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a really important topic, especially this time of year. More and more, we're having people install swimming pools, everything from full in-ground pools all the way to these, little blow-up kiddie pools.
Right.
And hopefully today we can talk about some of those.
We know that there are an alarming number of water-related deaths and injuries that occur around the country every year. And we know particularly this time of year, people are starting to think about pools. They're opening up their personal pools. They're going to public pools. So tell us what we need to know about pool safety. Do you need a permit for a pool, from the in-ground pool to the blow-up pool? And what do we need to know about pool barriers?
So starting with the swimming pool permits, any pool that is 24 inches deep or less is portable.
Okay.
And has no circulating equipment, no swimming pool pump,
Okay.
so to speak, does not need a permit. The caveat to that, though, is that it's the homeowner's responsibility that when that pool is unattended, that it be empty.
Okay.
If they're not emptying the pool, or if there's circulating equipment, then it must have a barrier and it must have a permit.
Okay.
From that, every other pool needs a permit, whether it's an above ground pool or an in-ground pool.
Let's back up and talk about barrier. What do you mean by a pool barrier? Is that always a fence? Is that something else? Does it need to be behind a locked gate? Let's talk about a pool barrier.
So here in Montgomery County, a pool barrier is, it's got a lot of design criteria, but essentially it's a 60-inch fence around a pool.
Okay.
In the case of an in-ground pool, that can be accomplished either by a fence that surrounds just the pool or a fence that encompasses the pool in a whole yard type fence situation. Okay. The key there, though, is that it be a 60-inch tall fence. Any of the gates must open in a particular direction and have a latch that is self-latching.
Okay.
The fence can't be climbable.
Okay.
So there's all kinds of design criteria that, of course, we'd be more than happy to help homeowners.
Must my pool also have a pool cover, or is the fence sufficient as a barrier?
So some pools have covers,
okay,
but that cover does not take the place of a barrier.
Okay.
There is one exception to that. If
Okay.
the pool was installed, an in-ground pool was installed prior to July of 1990,
Okay.
then the cover can suffice as that pool barrier.
Okay. Does the cover have to be an automatic cover? It can be a manual cover?
Must be an automatic cover.
Okay.
If the pool was installed after that date, then it must have a fence.
Let's talk about the need for barriers. When does a pool need a barrier?
So anytime a pool needs a permit, then it must have a barrier.
Okay.
So let me explain that a little bit.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, if a pool is less than 24 inches, has no circulating equipment, and is portable,
Okay.
it does not need a permit and therefore does not need a barrier.
Okay.
If it falls outside of that criteria, then it must have a barrier.
But in all circumstances, I need to be mindful of who's in that water or who's playing in that pool, even if it's a little kiddie pool or an in-ground pool, right?
Exactly. And that's pretty much what this boils down to is we want to protect the toddlers, the children,
Right.
even adults from accidentally finding themselves inside the pool. And ironically, with some of our animal populations, we're also trying to keep the animals out of the pools.
Right,
We
right.
have quite a deer population, and they occasionally find themselves in pools and can't get out.
Does a pool cover suffice as a barrier for my pool, or do I still need a fence?
No. So pool barrier does not suffice unless that pool was built prior to July of 1990.
Okay.
If the pool was built after that date, then it must have a fence. It must have a 60-inch barrier.
Okay. What permits do I need for my pool?
So each pool that requires a permit is going to have a building permit and
Okay.
an electrical permit.
Okay.
The electrical permit handles the electric side of it, the pool
Lights.
pumps, the
Okay.
lights, that type of thing. The
Okay.
building permit handles the structure of the pool and the inspections associated with that.
What construction documents are generally required? What kind of information does the customer have to provide DPS in order to get their pool permit?
So anytime a permit is applied for, we need a site plan
Okay.
showing how that pool is going to be oriented on the property,
Okay.
where it's going to be located to ensure that it meets the setback requirements. It's far enough away from
Sure.
neighboring property lines and that type of thing. And then there's design paperwork that must be submitted from generally a pool company that will show how the pool shell is being designed, where the skimmers are going to be, where the
Okay.
ladder cups are going to be,
Okay.
and stairs, egress, ingress, that type of thing.
Is this something that a homeowner can pull? Can a homeowner pull the pool permit, or must it be a contractor?
Now, a homeowner can pull his own swimming pool permit,
Okay.
and often do. The one piece that the homeowner can't do is the electrical permit.
Okay.
The electrical permit requires an electrician.
Okay. And is that a licensed master electrician, right?
Right.
Okay. What about hot tubs and spas? Are the rules the same for hot tubs and spas?
So they're a little bit different for hot tubs and spas. Spas and hot tubs are allowed covers
Okay.
instead of a 60-inch barrier. A
Okay.
spa does not require a 60-inch barrier, but it requires a lockable cover.
Okay.
The premise there is that you'll be able to close that cover, latch it, a child can't get in.
Okay.
There's some differences in the inspection process with spas. We look at, we pretty much treat spas as an appliance
Okay.
because they already have their pumps installed.
Yes.
It's a matter of hooking it up to an electric circuit.
Okay. How often do we get complaints from neighbors about pools?
Quite often. Here in a couple of months when the weather gets a little warmer,
Right.
there's a lot of misunderstanding on what's required for the kiddie pools.
Okay.
And this is about the time of year that the neighbors start looking at, well, their fence isn't in good repair. It
Okay.
needs to have the holes patched and
Right.
that kind of
Right.
thing. So we start getting complaints about now, and we investigate each one.
What about pool drains, grates, outlet configurations, pool cleaning fitters? Anything else we should note about pools, or anything else that someone who's considering a pool needs to make sure that they take care of or that they include?
So there's actually kind of two areas for the swimming pool. One is the installation and the inspections that go
Okay.
with that
Okay.
whole process, which is a fairly simple process.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of that is the day-to-day maintenance of that pool.
Okay.
When a swimming pool is installed, there are certain safety features built into that pool, such as drain covers
Okay.
that are a non-trap type of design, where if a swimmer gets too close to the drain, it doesn't pull them to the bottom,
Okay.
that kind of thing. There are maybe suction inlets along the walls, and they have covers on them.
Okay.
That's so that Again, if a child is swimming past it, it doesn't hold him against the wall,
Okay.
him or her. And those things need to be maintained on a daily basis. If they come off or they become dislodged, well, now we have a safety issue with the day-to-day use of the pool.
Does DPS regulate or inspect things like pool slides or diving boards?
Well, slides and diving boards we don't see too much anymore,
Okay.
mainly because of the depth required.
Okay.
But when we're doing the installation, if they've decided to have a diving board, then yes, that diving board is inspected to make sure that it's installed per the manufacturer's
Okay.
instruction, that any metal framing is bonded. One of the things that we do during our inspection process, there's essentially 3 inspections for a typical in-ground pool.
Okay.
One is the initial inspection after they've dug the hole.
Right.
They've put in the rebar. We come out and inspect that rebar cage that's part of the pool shell to ensure that all that rebar is electrically bonded to each other and that the bonding comes out of that shell so that it can be tied into the grounding grid so that there's no potential for an electric shock inside the pool.
Important. Right.
The next inspection generally is a bonding inspection for the pool deck.
Okay.
So if you've got concrete or pavers that you're putting around your pool, there's a grounding grid that goes around that deck, again, to ensure that there's no electrical hazard.
Okay.
At that time is when we're looking at the metal ladder cups that the ladder's going to mount in, or the diving board frame, or any other metal. Any metal that's within 5 feet of a swimming pool water's edge must be bonded.
Okay.
That's to ensure that, again, there's no shock hazard.
Okay.
And then our final inspection, we come back, we look at the operation of the pool. We look at by this time, the pool equipment is operating.
Okay.
We can see how the water is flowing. We look at the bonding of the motors itself. We look at any outlets that might be close to the pool. And that's when we really start looking at that pool barrier to see, okay, is it compliant? Is it tall enough? Non-climbable?
So a final inspection of my pool, I have to fill my pool up. It has to have water in it. Okay.
Yes. There are some exceptions to that.
Okay.
We generally don't want water in the pool until it's at that final stage.
Okay.
But there are a few types of pools that we allow water to be put in before it's at that stage. In certain areas, a fiberglass pool shell, for instance, if the water table is very high, it'll float out of the ground like a boat.
Okay.
So we allow the contractor to go ahead and fill the pool with water to kind of anchor it in place.
Okay. What about above ground pools? What you talked about primarily has been rules that apply to in-ground pools. What about an above ground pool?
So your typical above ground pool is 4 feet tall.
Okay.
And the code says that the barrier must be 60 inches.
Okay.
So in this case, they can mount a 2 foot tall barrier around the above ground pool.
Okay.
On top of the pool edge.
Okay.
Right. Or they have to do the 60-inch barrier around the pool.
Do people typically mount this 2 foot barrier on top of their pool, or do they? Okay.
It's very unusual. They usually do the 6 foot or the 5 foot pool or 5 foot fence around the whole structure.
Okay.
With the above ground pools, there's a few differences in that we're not looking at a pool bonding shell, that type of thing.
Sure.
Generally, we're just doing a final inspection to make sure that it's operating properly and it's properly grounded.
And again, does my pool have to have water in it to have that final inspection? My above ground pool have to have
It should for that final, yes.
Okay.
Because we want to see that pump is working properly.
Okay. What else do folks need to know? What are some other things that maybe we haven't talked about or I haven't asked about that you want to make sure that people pay attention to with pools this summer?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is just, have in mind safety at all times.
Okay.
There is a requirement that's quite often missed where if the house is part of that pool barrier
Okay.
and there are doors or windows that open from that first floor directly into the pool area,
Okay.
where a toddler may open a door
Oh,
and be able to get out,
right.
then there's a requirement for alarms on those doors.
Okay.
The other method to ensure that is that if there's an automatic pool barrier, automatic pool cover,
Okay.
in addition to the pool barrier that goes around,
Okay.
then the alarms are not required.
Okay.
So it's either an automatic pool cover or the alarms.
All right. What else? Is there anything else that folks need to think about with pools?
The biggest thing that we run into is their placement of their pool.
Okay.
Make sure that it's situated where they want it, obviously, but at the same time to understand that there are setback requirements from our zoning department that
Okay.
determine, it's got to be this many feet or so many feet off of the property line. And then it's real important that as the pool construction process begins,
Mm-hmm.
that if they make any changes to their design, to their orientation of the pool, to the
Okay.
location of the pool or
Okay.
the pool equipment, that they come back in and see us and make sure that they're still going to comply with that,
Okay.
with those setback requirements. We
Okay.
have had an occasion here or there where they changed the orientation of the pool that made it too close to a setback requirement,
Okay.
and that pool had to be removed and moved.
Not a fun time
No.
to
So
dig up my pool.
We would much rather people come in, ask questions. They can call us directly.
Okay.
We'd rather handle it that way than having somebody go through the expense of uprooting a pool.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dave, for joining us on the podcast today. And remember, we are here to help you, our customer, succeed. It's important to know when you need a permit and when you don't need a permit. We are available to you Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. at the DPS offices located at 2425 Reedy Drive on the 7th floor. You can also call our customer support center by dialing 311 if you're in Montgomery County or 240-777-0311 if you're out of the county. Our office hours are Monday through Friday from 7:30 a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. Got an idea or a question for an upcoming podcast? We want to hear from you. Email your ideas and questions to dps.podcast@montgomerycountymd.gov. And remember, you can go to the DPS website for all kinds of information and resources to help you with your project. Our website is montgomerycountymd.gov/DPS. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with your friends and your family and subscribe so that you always get our latest episode. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, DPS is your project partner.
This podcast is brought to you by County Cable Montgomery, your source for news and information from the Montgomery County government. Connect with us via cable, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube by searching for County Cable MoCo.